Xiao Yan's first clash of soul power with Cao Ying, renowned as the enchantress of the Cao clan, was more challenging than he anticipated, as her ancient soul technique left him with a splitting headache. Continuing from the last chapter, in the first two assessments of Dan City's 5 major clans, Xiao Yan not only dominated the other 4 clans' younger generation, but also repeatedly broke records previously set by Cao Ying. The upcoming third test involved a battle of soul power within a red circle at the center of the plaza. The last one standing would be the victor. Just as Xiao Yan and the others were about to step into the circle, Cao Ying, seated in the stands, declared that she would be participating in this round. This announcement was met with immediate support within the Grand Hall, especially from those who harbored ill intentions towards the Yi clan and relished the prospect of seeing Xiao Yan defeated by Cao Ying. Elder Shang, observing this, furrowed his brow slightly. Given that the Cao clan had won the last pill competition, they were indeed entitled to a substitution in this test. Moreover, Elder Shang knew that while Cao Ying might have been itching for a challenge, her primary intent was likely to curb Xiao Yan's momentum. After pondering for a moment, Xiao Yan smiled at Cao Ying and said, "Since Miss Cao has spoken, it would be ungentlemanly of me not to accept the challenge." Cao Ying replied, "Mr. Xiao certainly knows how to turn a phrase." Seeing Xiao Yan's agreement, Elder Shang made no further comment and pointed to the red circle on the ground. "If there are no objections, then let's begin." Upon hearing this, the 5 participants entered the circle one by one and sat cross-legged. Immediately, 5 powerful surges of soul energy erupted from within them. Under this fierce collision of soul power, the 5 figures trembled. Xiao Yan and Cao Ying only had a slight shake of their shoulders before stabilizing, while the other 3 were forcibly pushed back a distance. At this moment, Xiao Yan's gaze was fixed intently on Cao Ying across from him. He knew that the previous soul collision was specifically targeted at him. Fortunately, he had been prepared, unlike Dan Xian and the other 2, who were caught in the crossfire. The soul power of Xiao Yan and Cao Ying was far beyond what they could handle. Though Dan Xian and his companions were aware of this disparity and felt a sense of frustration, they had no choice but to accept it. Cao Ying's enchanting smile grew even more alluring as she remarked, "Indeed, you are not simple." As her words fell, she swiftly formed a series of hand seals. Instantly, the soul power surrounding her transformed into a soul phoenix. With a flap of its wings, even the space around it cracked with fine spatial fissures. Under Cao Ying's command, the soul phoenix charged at Xiao Yan. Just as it was about to strike him, Xiao Yan let out a cold shout. A massive soul fist suddenly materialized and smashed into the soul phoenix's head. Their collision created a fierce soul storm. Xiao Yan's seated body was pushed back 3 steps by the tremendous force, whereas Cao Ying, leveraging her attack, only stepped back 2. Nonetheless, this outcome astonished many onlookers, as they hadn't expected Xiao Yan to withstand a direct clash with the Cao Ying without being overpowered. However, the most unfortunate ones were Dan Xian and the other 2, who hadn't even attacked yet and were pushed back several meters by the sudden storm. Smiling wryly, Dan Xian and Qiao realized that staying any longer would only make them background characters. They promptly admitted defeat and exited the red circle. The stubborn Bai Ying, however, gritted his teeth in frustration. Once a prominent figure in the Bai clan, he couldn't accept being reduced to Xiao Yan's sidekick. With a malicious glint in his eyes, Bai Ying, seeing that Xiao Yan's attention was solely on Cao Ying, formed a soul python and launched it at Xiao Yan. Sensing Bai Ying's sudden attack, Xiao Yan didn't hesitate. With a flick of his sleeve, the soul python shattered in the collision of their soul powers. Bai Ying, his soul severely damaged, spewed blood and was sent flying back. Xiao Yan didn't even blink at this. His focus remained on Cao Ying. Her smile gave him the unsettling feeling of being watched by a venomous snake. Cao Ying said, "You are very strong. It's clear you haven't been using your full strength in the previous assessments. Now that it's just the 2 of us, there's no need to delay any further. If you can withstand 3 of my soul seal palms, I will withdraw. Of course, if you choose to withdraw now, you can still secure second place, and the Yi clan will be saved. So, will you stay or leave?" In response to Cao Ying's provocation, Xiao Yan smiled slightly. He knew that if he withdrew now, the Yi clan would successfully retain their position among the 5 major clans. Furthermore, Cao Ying would undoubtedly participate in the upcoming pill competition, making it a perfect opportunity to gauge her abilities. Xiao Yan replied, "Miss Xiao, please." Cao Ying remarked, "Mr. Xiao, you truly have an extraordinary demeanor. But since that's the case, allow me to give it my all." As her words fell, a vast amount of soul power quickly formed in her palm. Xiao Yan focused intently on Cao Ying's soul imprint, frowning slightly. He could sense that the soul power gathered wasn't much stronger than the previous soul phoenix, but its power was significantly greater. According to Cao Ying, it was said that ancient alchemists had a way to maximize the power of soul energy, known as soul techniques. The technique Cao Ying was now displaying was one of these long-lost soul techniques, making it extremely formidable. Hearing this, Xiao Yan's heart tightened, and he looked at Cao Ying's maintained soul imprint with a hint of fervor. He had heard the Dozun of Fire mention these techniques before. However, he was puzzled since the Dozun of Fire had described soul techniques as methods for cultivating the soul, while Cao Ying's technique was clearly an attack method. Could it be that soul techniques were divided into offensive and cultivation categories? Regardless of the type, Xiao Yan had none of them. As if sensing Xiao Yan's gaze, Cao Ying shouted, "Soul Profound Seal Palm." Watching the soul imprint tear a dark rift in the space before him, Xiao Yan didn't dare be careless. He quickly formed another massive soul fist to counter it. Under this intense collision, Xiao Yan was pushed back more than 10 steps before he could steady himself. Seeing this, Cao Ying's eyes flashed with surprise, as even some high-level 7th-tier alchemists would struggle to withstand that palm. She hadn't expected Xiao Yan to only be pushed back a dozen steps. Her admiration for him grew. Naturally arrogant and competitive, Cao Ying had previously considered only the young girl Dan Chen from the Dan clan as her rival. But since Dan Chen rarely left her family, seeing Xiao Yan now made her eager for a challenge. A peculiar pressure emanated from his palm, causing a stir within his soul. Xiao Yan's eyes were intensely focused on Cao Ying's rapidly changing hand seals, with emerald green flames flickering in his dark eyes. As the flames flickered, Xiao Yan noticed that Cao Ying's previously swift hand movements were slowing down significantly. In that instant, a profound realization dawned upon him, akin to a sudden enlightenment. No one had ever explained these techniques to Xiao Yan before, but today, witnessing Cao Ying perform a soul technique he had never seen, many of his previous confusions about utilizing soul power started to unravel. At the same time, Cao Ying's overwhelming palm strike came crashing down. Although Xiao Yan barely managed to withstand it, he was left in a dire state. If not for his last-minute punch stabilizing him by hitting the ground, he might have already been knocked out of the arena. Yet, the fire in Xiao Yan's eyes only burned more fiercely. "Again!" he shouted. Cao Ying's expression finally changed slightly. Instantly, several times stronger soul power erupted from her palms. Seeing this, Xiao Yan smiled slightly and then, with some difficulty, performed a similar hand seal. Instantly, the abundant soul power around him began to rapidly coalesce. Witnessing this, Cao Ying's pupils contracted, her face filled with shock. Xiao Yan's clumsy hand seal was identical to the one she had just executed. Although Xiao Yan's hand seal was slightly weaker in its formation, it was enough to leave Cao Ying deeply shaken. She had never imagined that Xiao Yan, during their intense battle, could replicate her technique just by observing it twice. Cao Ying, often dubbed a genius, was utterly stunned by Xiao Yan's extraordinary talent. A soul storm erupted from Cao Ying's palm. Simultaneously, Xiao Yan, with a loud shout, thrust out his unusual hand seal. The resulting deep explosion reverberated throughout the hall, causing many onlookers to feel a sharp pain in their souls. The violent soul storm raged for nearly a minute before slowly dissipating. Where Xiao Yan had been seated, several deep pits marred the ground, and his clothes were tattered. In contrast, Cao Ying stood unaffected. Although Xiao Yan had been slightly inferior in this clash, he had withstood all 3 of Cao Ying's strikes and had not been knocked out of the red circle. By the rules, Xiao Yan was the victor of this bout. Cao Ying said, "3 strikes are up, you've won." Her words brought a hush to the grand hall. Moments later, exclamations of astonishment erupted. After all, Cao Ying was a renowned figure in Dan City, and this was the first time anyone had seen her concede to appear. On the Yi family's side, Yi Zhong and Xiao Yan were filled with excitement. Xiao Yan's performance in this test was beyond their wildest expectations, reminiscent of the Yi family's peak era. Watching the excitement on Yi Zhong and Xiao Yan's faces, Little Fairy Doctor and the Dozun of Fire exchanged a smile. Little Fairy Doctor then turned her beautiful eyes towards the slender figure in the arena. From start to finish, he had never disappointed them. No matter who his opponent was, he never lost confidence. However, only Xiao Yan knew that this victory was merely a stroke of luck, as he could sense that Cao Ying had not used her full strength throughout the battle. Xiao Yan said, "Miss Cao Ying, thank you for going easy on me. If there had been one more strike, I wouldn't have been able to withstand it." Cao Ying replied, "Are you trying to steal my soul hand seal technique?" Hearing Cao Ying's blunt words, Xiao Yan felt a bit embarrassed. The soul hand seal was not difficult to learn, and among soul techniques, it was not considered high level. However, for someone like Xiao Yan, who had never practiced soul techniques, it was a precious treasure. Seeing Xiao Yan's awkward expression, Cao Ying covered her mouth and laughed. "If Mr. Xiao Yan has the time, perhaps we could have another private session. I have other soul techniques. Let's see if you can steal those as well." Xiao Yan knew better than to take Cao Ying's words seriously. He suspected that the enchantress was somewhat displeased with her minor defeat and wanted to find an opportunity to reclaim her pride. Xiao Yan responded, "If there is a chance, I would definitely seek Miss Cao Ying's guidance." Seeing his ambiguous response, Cao Ying understood that Xiao Yan was not like other men who would easily fall for her charms. But that's what made the challenge exciting, right? She then gazed deeply into Xiao Yan's eyes and said, "The pill competition is approaching. I hope to see you there. I know you were holding back earlier." With that, Cao Ying turned and walked out of the grand hall. Watching her graceful yet proud figure, Xiao Yan exhaled lightly. It seemed this woman was no easy opponent. Though he had won this bout by luck, Xiao Yan knew that for Cao Ying, this was just a warm-up. Thus, the assessment of the 5 major families concluded with Xiao Yan winning the championship, securing the Yi family's position among the Pill Tower elders. After the event, Dan Xian of the Dan family approached Xiao Yan to congratulate him. Xiao Yan found Dan Xian to be a likable person. As they conversed, Xiao Yan couldn't help but glance at the young girl behind Dan Xian. She was curiously staring at him, and when she met his gaze, she quickly withdrew her head, hiding behind Dan Xian. Dan Xian smiled and said, "This is my cousin, Dan Chun. She has always been shy around strangers." Xiao Yan smiled and shook his head. He had interacted with this girl before and knew some of her strange quirks. Clearly, she was a master at hiding her true abilities. What surprised him was that he couldn't sense any soul fluctuations from Dan Chun. After exchanging pleasantries for a while, Dan Xian cupped his hands and took his leave. However, just as Xiao Yan and his companions were about to leave, Sheng Yao, the chief examiner, stopped them. Sheng Yao had once received some guidance from Xiao Yan's teacher, Yao Chan. His purpose here was to invite Xiao Yan to meet with the president of the Pill Tower. With the pill competition approaching, and with rumors that the Soul Hall would send participants, they needed to find trustworthy and capable allies to compete for the 3,000 burning flames. Moreover, Sheng Yao mentioned that the soul techniques Cao Ying practiced were also taught at the Pill Tower. After contemplating for a moment, Xiao Yan nodded slowly. He was indeed interested in those soul techniques, and given the Pill Tower's power and status, they wouldn't need to resort to any underhanded means against him. Thus, he agreed. Sheng Yao smiled and said, "Haha, it's settled then. In a few days, I will personally come to escort you to the Pill Tower." After a brief conversation between Yi Zhong and Elder Shang, Xiao Yan and his companions returned to their residence. While the outside world was abuzz with news of Xiao Yan's championship victory, Xiao Yan stayed indoors, quietly studying the soul hand seal he had learned from Cao Ying. As he was deeply engrossed in his research, a sudden sense of unease spread within him. Turning his head, he looked towards a seemingly empty spot in the courtyard and said calmly, "Since you're here, why hide?" The disciple of that old Yao Chun indeed had sharp senses. As soon as he spoke, a shadow slowly emerged from the twisted space. Xiao Yan asked, "Someone from the Soul Hall?" The old man replied, "He. I heard that Yao Chen's bone spirit cold fire is with you. so I've come to borrow it." As he spoke, a deep blue flame began to rise slowly from within him. Seeing this, Xiao Yan's pupils contracted sharply. "Sea Heart Flame,